Hello and welcome to another episode of KCC Revision. My name is Nyongesa Edwin. If you are new to this channel, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Also, you can like, comment, and share to help our channel reach more people. Now, today I want us to look at paper 1 poetry. In our previous episode, two or three episodes before this one, we looked at paper 2 poetry. So in this session, I want us to look at paper 1 poetry. And, just for the essentials of the high school syllabus, we are going to refer to this kind of poetry as paper 1 poetry. Otherwise, normally, post-secondary institutions, when you're doing this kind of stuff, when you're doing literature, we call this kind of poetry oral poetry. That is, paper 1 poetry is called oral poetry. And then paper 2 poetry is actually what we call comprehensive or literary poetry. So our attention in this episode is doing a diagnosis of paper 1 poetry and draw a distinction and a line between paper 1 poetry and paper 2 poetry. Paper 1 poetry, as I said, is actually oral poetry. This is poetry for performance purposes. So you look at poetry in terms of its performance, in terms of rhythm, in terms of features, sound features, and features that enhance rhythm and all that kind of stuff. So this kind of poetry is different from paper 2 poetry in the sense that paper 2 poetry is deeper in terms of meaning. We are going to look at poetic styles and devices. We are going to look at tone, mood, and attitude. We are going also in paper 2, we'll also consider the idea of poetic persona, thematic message, subject matter, what's the poem all about, and even paraphrasing a given poem. But this kind of stuff is not in this kind of poetry that I want us to discuss. So again, what is paper 1 poetry? So in this kind of poem, I told you, emphasis is placed on performance of that particular poem, that piece of poem. So mostly you are going to consider aspects such as sound features, performance of this particular poem to an audience, and what have you. So such kind of things. So you'll be required, for example, to look at, for example, the rhyme scheme. Now, rhyme scheme in a poem will refer to the pattern created by rhyming words. That pattern that is going to be created by rhyming words. So, when you are looking at rhyme scheme, you are considering the last words in every line of a poem, the syllabic sound, that last syllabic sound, you compare it with subsequent sounds, and then you come up with their pattern. So that pattern must be in terms of I use the alphabet, small letters, and it must be arranged horizontally. So you begin with the pattern. When they ask you to describe the rhyme scheme or give the rhyme scheme, always begin with the pattern first. Don't begin by describing it. So give the pattern. For example, it can be A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E. And then after giving the pattern, you say why. So you say whether it's regular or irregular. So in the pattern that I've given, A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, the pattern is actually regular because you can predict the oncoming sound segmentation or the oncoming sound segment. So you say it's regular. So you begin with the pattern, say whether it's regular or irregular, and then you say why. You can predict the next sound pattern. So that's what you call the rhyme scheme. Rhyme scheme is not a sound feature. Instead, rhyme is a sound feature. So when they ask you to give sound features, consider sound features such as rhyme and not rhyming words. Just say rhyme, not rhyming words. Say rhyme. Of course, will refer to words with similar sound syllabification at the end, not the entire word. But even if it's an entire word and it's appearing at the end of a line, that is end of line rhyme, and then it can be considered as rhyme. So rhyme, so you identify, you say rhyme, and then you give words that have rhyming, words that are rhyme, words that rhyme, and then so you identify and illustrate. That, of course, is the rule here. Identification must always be followed by illustration. So rhyme will also include, of course, assonance, consonance, onomatopoeia, and of course idiophones or idiophones. So those are sound features in a poem. So when you're told, for example, what exactly do we mean with, for example, alliteration? Alliteration, that is Alliteration. Alliteration. Alliteration refers to repetition of the initial of the first consonant sound in words that appear close together in the same line of a poem. These words must not be separate, should not be separated by content words. So if there's a content word, then those words do not alliterate. So remember all these features, including rhyme, the enhanced rhythm, stroke, musicality. So that is alliteration. You identify it and then you underline the sounds that alliterate. And remember, dear viewer, we are concerned with the sound and not necessarily the word or the letter. The letter. So we are concerned more with the sound that a letter produces rather than the letter in isolation. So it's more about the sound. That's why they are called sound features. And then we also have what we call assonance, repetition of vowel sounds in whichever position in a line within words that appear close together in a line of a poem. So those words must be within closer proximity. So here we are repeating vowel sounds, but within the same line, but whichever position. Consonants will refer to repetition of the final or the last consonant sound in words that appear close together in a line of a poem. And remember, as I said, all these sound features enhance rhythm or musicality. Do not forget, all these features enhance rhythm or musicality. I want to discourage the use of repetition. Repetition is not a sound feature, it has been discouraged. And the argument is that all these sound features is actually based on repetition. So repetition ceases to be a sound feature. So examiners, especially for English paper one, have really discouraged and we want to encourage candidates and tutors to do away with the idea of teaching repetition, especially as a sound feature, because students are not going to be marked right. So right from Form 1, let students know that repetition is not a sound feature and is just being discouraged in totality. However, once it crosses over to paper 2, it becomes as a poetic device. So in paper 1, please avoid repetition as a sound feature. We also have what we call idiophones. These are real sounds or actual sounds produced in a natural environment. And then we use them the way they are in the domain of a poem. We don't alter, we don't change anything. For example, the sound that cows produce, if it is more, we are just going to use more. That is M-O-O-O, the way it is. So these are actual sounds that are produced in an environment, and then we use them the way they are without changing them. In other words, idiophonic sounds cannot be found maybe in the English dictionary, or they are not English words as such. So we call them idiophones, but they help in capturing authenticity of a sound maybe in a given environment. And then onomatopoeia will refer to words that imitate sounds they produce, but because of constant and popular usage, we have made them English words. So onomatopoeic words are actually English words. They can be found in the English dictionary. Even though they imitate sounds produced in the natural environment, we have made them look like English words, sometimes by attaching affixes and what have you. So words such as whistle, such as shuffling, such as whistling, such kind of words, roar, third, such kind of words are onomatopoeic. They imitate sounds produced, but we have made them English words because of everyday usage and so on. So those are what we call the sound features in a given poem. Now remember, I said that this kind of poetry is concerned more with the performance of that particular poem. So they are going to ask you, how will you say a line of a poem? how will you say line 4? How will you say the last line? When they ask you how will you say a given line, always combine verbal and non-verbal cues in order to score. Combine verbal and non-verbal cues in order to score. So remember, give any other given line, you are going to maybe look at the way the line is. Maybe you are going to use even intonation. I will lower my tone. I will use falling intonation because it's a statement. So when you use intonation, that is actually verbal. So you must also look for other non-verbal cues appropriately. So use them appropriately. So I'll lower my tone while flapping my hands. I will raise my tone while smiling and such kind of thing. So you must use verbal and non-verbal cues in order for you actually to score. When they ask you how will you perform the last line of a poem, now most of the time the last line you are coming to the end of the thinking, you are coming to the end of the poem, so you say it with finality. So you say it with a falling intonation. But again, falling intonation must also be accompanied by appropriate non-verbal cues. So don't just say falling intonation and you stop there. So I will say it with a falling intonation to indicate the end of the poem or a state of finality, while wearing a frown, while smiling, while gesturing, while flapping, while beckoning, any appropriate non-verbal cues. So it must come out. So always combine verbal and non-verbal cues in order for you to score when you are asked, how do you perform a line of a poem? You can also be asked to stress can also be asked to stress. When I told which words will you stress and why, we always stress content words. Content words are like verbs and adjectives and main verbs and some adverbs, such as adverbs of place. We are going to stress them because they carry meaning on their own. By content words, we mean words that carry meaning on their own. As compared to structural words that don't carry meaning on their own, such as prepositions, conjunctions, such as helping verbs, so they don't carry meaning on their own, and so we don't stress them. So you say, I'll stress this word and this word because it carries, or because they carry the meaning of the line, and you can even give them meaning that is brought out by using those kind of words. So when they ask you which words will you stress and why, you say, I'll stress this word and this word because they are the content words. They bring out the meaning in a given line. Another question is, how will you perform the poem effectively to an audience? How do you perform a poem effectively to an audience? Of course, this is where now you use paralinguistic features. This is where now you use using of gestures appropriately, meaningful eye contact through dramatization, wearing, of course, appropriate costume, make proper enunciation and pronunciation of words, mimicry, tonal variation, and what have you. Another question that has evolved from this kind of poetry is, how will you perform the poem to the visually impaired? When they ask you how will you perform the poem to the visually impaired, and then you eliminate all non-verbal cues. So it means, because remember the visually impaired cannot see. So instead you use now verbal cues such as proper intonation, stressing important words such as maximum, maybe by projecting your voice maximally but not shouting. So you just play around with this kind of words. And then lastly, on this particular question, they can ask you, you have performed this poem to an audience and you realize they look disinterested, or some members of the audience are actually dozing off. What could have gone wrong? So you say, you give anything that you may have done wrongly. And remember, in this particular paper one, we discourage use of the negative marker not. So you don't say I was not, maybe I was not. So you say, if you don't say I was not audible, you say I was inaudible, and so on. So you bring out such kind of stuff by making sure that you are fulfilling the demands of the question. You personalize the question. If they ask you, how will you? Then you say, I will, because you have to personalize that question and own it, and then respond appropriately. So members can doze off when You have failed to maintain appropriate eye contact. When you are inaudible, when you fail to utilize the stage fully through body movement, and what have you. So you just play around with them. So, in a nutshell, dear viewer, those are the considerations when you are talking about English Paper 1 poetry. English Paper 1 poetry. This is very easy poetry, and if you address it well, you can actually scoop all the marks. So that is it for today. If you have liked this content, if you think it is dope, please go like it, give it a subscription to help it even reach more users. Until next time, it is actually goodbye.